Good evening and welcome to the Job Search Solution, the radio program where we talk about looking for a job, changing jobs, changing careers, hiring. And as always, we begin with a prayer. Dear God, grant us thy peace and thy mercy, thy will be done. And in just a few minutes, Rich Levinsky is going to be with us talking about consultants in the workplace as he does every Wednesday evening. Always an interesting observation about what's going on in the world of consulting. And by the way, I want to mention if you have any thoughts or questions or concerns that relative to your own job search or somebody else's, or just in general, don't hesitate to email me at Tony, Tony, at babich.com. I want to speak to something this evening that is so simple and so important in the job search on the part of the employer. And we're going to discuss this on the part of a hiring authority this evening and next week on the part of a candidate. And that has to do with checking references. I'd be willing to bet that 35 or 40% of the people that do hiring don't check previous employment references. And it's probably one of the biggest mistakes that employers make. And it is absolutely so simple to do. Interviewing is a staged, contrived event. We all know that. We have a tendency to make decisions about the capability of a candidate and their ability to do the job based on the way they interview, based on, and even validly, their previous track record, at least what they tell you their previous track record is. But it's oftentimes very difficult to confirm that and get an objective opinion of that by just listening to a candidate or paying attention to what he or she says that they've done in the past. And it's through the light of, and we base, look, 40% of our decision, whether we like it or not, is based on, do we like them? Do they fit into our company? Do we get along well with them? Do we like them? We've discussed that in other sessions. But what's more important is to check references. Nobody really likes to do this. It's kind of a pain in the neck. You got to track a group of people down and you got to ask them questions, and you're already biased towards a candidate one way or the other. But this is really important. It's so simple, it's stupid. You ask the candidate, I want 3 people that you have worked for. Not your rabbi, not your priest, not your wife or your husband, not your best friend, not your cousin, not your 3rd grade school teacher, none of that. I want people that you've actually worked for so I can check a reference. Now, some candidates are going to say, well, my previous company doesn't allow people to check references with my previous boss. You tell them, look, and this is really important. There are 3 or 4 people vying for this position. All of the rest of the people that you are competing with are getting me references of people they have worked for. So I expect you to do the same thing. So I don't really care what your company's policy was or is, previous employer's policy was or is. What I expect you to do is to come up with somebody that you have worked for so I can ask them questions about your background. So that's the first most important thing. Get at least 3. And then come up with a set of questions that you ask every one of them. Don't ad lib this. If you ad lib it, you'll ask one person one thing and one person another. When you go to ask the questions, confirm what the candidate has told you that they've done in the job from the person that they have actually worked for, and take really good notes. Ask every one of the references the same thing so that you can compare. This is probably one of the most important things you can do in the interviewing and hiring process, is to check these references and tell the candidate to line the reference up, set a time that you're going to call the reference. You may have to, it may take a while to do. It is not easy because you're going to have to catch people. Lots of people don't necessarily like to give references, but it's really important that you get them. If an individual will not give you a reference on a candidate, something is wrong, especially if they've worked for that person before, and that's the only ones that are really credible. Just because somebody's worked for somebody doesn't mean that that person they worked for necessarily liked them. You're not asking that. You're asking, how did they perform? And you have to ask specific questions. Things like, what did you think of the candidate? That doesn't mean anything. How did the candidate perform based on what you all expected of the candidate? And ask very specific questions about the performance. It doesn't have to take long, maybe 5-10 minutes at the most, but you've got to get them and get them right. It will help you make a really good decision on a candidate. If a candidate can't come up with references like that, I'd question whether or not you ought to hire them. All right, we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. This is Tony Bashir with the Job Search Solution.